All right, this is part 3 of the Unit 5 test review. So here, number 13, you are asked to factor. So we're going to need to factor x cubed minus 2x squared minus 2x plus 4. Now you have 4 terms here. So we're actually going to factor this by grouping. So we're going to group our first 2 and our second 2 terms. All right. Then we're going to consider this first term, or we're going to consider what we can factor out of these 2 terms. Now, what they have in common is going to be the variable x. This has an x to the third and an x squared. So we're going to factor out an x squared. You can always factor out the variable with the lowest exponent. Well, if we factor that out, what's going to remain is the 1x here and the minus 2 here. So that would be x minus 2. Then we take a look at these second 2 terms. Now we have a negative and a minus, and this can be a little confusing. Sometimes you factor out the positive, and sometimes you factor out the negative. If we're looking for a common factor of x minus 2, we're actually going to need to factor out the negative of this one. And what we're factoring out is the 2, because 2 and 4 have the factor of 2 in common. You can never take out more than that lowest number 2, but they don't both have an x. So all we're going to do is we're going to factor out actually the minus 2. That means we're going to be left after negative 2 times what gives you negative 2x. Well, that's going to be x. And then if you're trying to multiply negative 2 times something to get to positive 4, well, that's times negative 2. So that's what we're left with, is the x minus 2. So when we group like that, you see this common binomial of x minus 2, and then you also take the factors you factored out of x squared minus 2. So our answer, we have the x squared minus 2 times x minus 2. And again, if you were to FOIL this, you would end up with this term right here. All right, let's take a look at number 14. Same thing here. We have these 4 terms with our exponents are descending, x cubed plus 5x squared plus 4x plus 20. We're going to factor this by grouping. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms, and I'm going to group the second term, 2 terms, okay? Then we're looking for the common factors. Of course, this is x to the third, which is x times x times x. This is 5x squared, which is 5 times x. Well, what they have in common is the x, the variable of x, and we can take out the x squared because x squared is a factor of both of these terms. Now, after we factor that out, we're left with x plus 5. So then we're doing this factor by grouping. What we're looking for is this common factor of x plus 5. And you'll see in this one, the 4x and the 20, what they have in common is the 4. So we're going to take out that positive 4, and we're going to be left again with x plus 5. You see your common binomial, and you take your x squared plus 4. So this is going to end up as x squared plus 4, these 2 terms here, and then the common binomial of x plus 5. And that's how you write that answer in factored form. All right, let's take a look at numbers 15 and 16. All right, so these are trinomials that we're going to be factoring. Actually, 16 looks like grouping again, I believe. So in number 15, we're going to factor this trinomial. Remember, we use our factor tree. Our X puzzle, where we multiply. In the top, we have A times C, and then the bottom we have B. Well, in this one, A is 1, and C is negative 6. So 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. So we're looking for the factors of negative 6 that equal B, and this is a plus 1x, so the B is 1. Well, what are the factors of negative 6 that equal 1? Well, if we just jot down those factors, they are 1 times negative 6 and 2. Well, let's just consider the 6. Okay, so it's 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Well, the only numbers that we could make equal 1 would be 3 and 2. Now, when we multiply them, we need to be a negative. When we add them, we need a positive. So that means it's going to be positive 3 and then minus 2. And then we draw our line across and we put that over the x, a to the x, but that's just a 1x. So that are your terms right there. X minus 3, or x plus 3 times x minus 2. So x plus 3 times x minus 2. And that would be the factored form of number 15. All right, number 16. Again, it looks like we're going to do some grouping here. So we can group these first terms and the second terms and see if we can factor out a common binomial. In this first one, we can factor out the x squared, and we'll be left with x minus 4. I took out all of the x squared. All that was left was minus 4. So x squared times x minus 4. In this one here, the minus 4x and the plus 16, if we're looking for an x minus 4, we will factor out the negative 4. So I'm going to factor out minus 4. Then I'm going to be left with x minus 4 again, because a negative 4 times a negative 4 is positive 16. And then negative 4 times x is x minus 4. So when you put your x squared and your minus 4 together in your first binomial, x squared minus 4, and then your common binomial of x minus 4 here, then you have factored it. But what you need to notice on this one is that this x squared minus 4 is the difference of two perfect squares. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 4 is 2. So we have the difference of two squares. And we learned that we can factor that by adding the squares, the square roots, and subtracting them. So we would have x plus 2 times x minus 2 is how we factor this term, and then we have x minus 4 remaining. So x minus 4. And that is the final simplified or factored form of this expression. All right, and then here in 17 and 18, we're going to be factoring trinomials. So in 17, we have an x squared minus x minus 2. So again, you can use the strategy that I taught you of using this little x puzzle, where we're finding the factors of a times c that equal b. And in this one, again, we have a 1 for a, and a times c, negative 2. So we're trying to find the factors of negative 2 that equal negative 1, negative 1 being the b. Okay, so let's just consider the factors of 2. Of course, that's 1 times 2, and that's all we have. So the factors of negative 2 that equal negative 1, well, it's going to have to be 1 minus 2. So it's going to be 1 minus 2, which equals negative 1. And then remember, we just put that over the x value, which is positive 1x. And that's simplified already, so we have an x plus 1 and an x minus 2 as our factors. So x plus 1 times x minus 2. All right, then in number 18, we have x squared plus x minus 2. So the difference in this one is that the a value, or the b value, is plus 1x, but we would again use the x puzzle. But like number 17, this is 1 times negative 2. So we're trying to find the factors of negative 2 that now equal positive 1. So again, the factors of 2 are just 1 times 2, but if we want that to equal positive 1, then it would be positive 2 minus 1. Put that over our x value, and our factors is x plus 2 times x minus 1. So x plus 2 times x minus 1. All right, and that's a look at factoring.